Good morning. It's good to be here in God's house to worship and dive into His Word. One thing I love doing as a youth pastor is getting to share with y'all, the congregation, what I'm sharing with the youth. And this is a Sunday school series. We're going through the Gospel of Luke, and this message really spoke to me when I was sharing it with the youth, and I wanted to share that blessing with y'all. So this morning we're going to talk about faith. There is a question that I need to ask first. What is faith? We see that word a lot in the Bible, and depending on your Bible translations, you see it anywhere from 230 times to 521. So it is very safe to say, faith is important. But what is it? The writer of Hebrews tells us in Hebrews 11 that now faith is the confidence of what we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. All right, so the writer of Hebrews tells us faith is, having confidence in what we hope for and believing or having assurance in what we can't see. Makes sense. As you know by now, I love superheroes. I think I bring that up in almost every sermon I preach, but something I really love. Because it's easy to tie the gospel into that message. And working with children and youth, who also like superheroes from time to time, that can come in handy. But what I like is seeing the citizens of those cities have faith in their heroes, that they are going to protect them and guard them and give their lives for them. The people of New York, they know that their friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is going to swing in and save the day. The people of Gotham have confidence that they can walk the streets at night because their dark knight is protecting them. But why is faith important? The writer of Hebrews also tells us in verse 6, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. So Hebrews shows us that faith is important so that we can please God. That's what we're called to do. Please our God and our Creator. Turn to Him and turn away from our sin. So this morning, we're going to be in Luke chapter 8. And we're going to look at a question that Jesus asks His disciples. The disciples briefly lost sight of what is important. They briefly forgot who their faith was in. But Jesus reminds them through encounters of 3 different peoples what real faith looks like. So in Luke 8:22, follow along. One day Jesus said to His disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into the boat and set out. And as they sailed, He fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake, and that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke Him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the winds and the raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" He asked His disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this that He commands even the winds and the waters that they obey Him?" So in Luke 8:22, Jesus tells His disciples, "Hey, come with me. We're going to go on a little adventure. We're going to just get on the boat and go to the other side of the lake." In the men's Bible study, we also looked at this passage in Mark, and we learned, hey, most of the disciples were fishermen. They knew the waters of the Lake of Galilee, or the Sea of Galilee. It's confusing. It's actually a lake, but it's called a sea. Anyway, that's beside the point. They understood the waters of the lake. 4 of the 12 disciples were fishermen, so they knew those waters. They were like, oh, this is going to be a breeze. A lot of them probably woke up and thought, oh, nothing out of the ordinary, just a typical adventure with Jesus this day. Same as usual. Little did they know, they were about to get a crash course on the concept and idea of faith. As they set sail across the lake, Jesus took a nap and fell asleep. Jesus needed rest too, and this was probably one of the few instances where He could just go away and be alone. But just as Jesus fell asleep, a great storm fell upon them. I think the book of Matthew tells us that it was like a hurricane levels of weather, and the disciples were freaking out. They were scared. They were terrified. They were scared for their lives that they woke Jesus up and accused him of not caring for their lives, saying, "Master, we're going to drown and you're just here taking a nap? Don't you care?" Everything around the disciples' lives were chaos. And all they could think of in that moment was how they were going to die. However, Jesus wasn't worried. He took a nap, he fell asleep, because he was in control of the situation. He knew what was going to happen and what the outcome was going to be. We see that he woke up, rebuked the winds, rebuked the storm, and then he asked a very important question. He asked the disciples, "Where is your faith?" Because in that moment, their faith wasn't in Jesus. In that moment, they lost sight of Jesus. The disciples were so focused and fixated on what was going on around them that they forgot to look to the one who had control. They became discouraged because of their life circumstances, and they let fear blind them in their faith. They were more concerned with their own lives than the one whom had master over their life. But how many times do we do that in our own lives? That we look around at what's going on in our own lives and think, how can I keep going? We try our best for our family and friends, but when life becomes too hard, we start to ask the question, how will I ever make it through? We all have storms in our lives. In the men's Bible study, we talked about if you're not leaving a storm, or you're either going into a storm or you're coming out of one. But we all have storms. Job loss, death in the family, illness, family and marital issues, financial problems. And we can look at it and think, this is way too much. How can I handle this? But Jesus asked us the same question he asked his disciples. Where is your faith? I remember one time when I was a kid, and I talked to my mom about this before the sermon started, so she remembers this too. We took a trip to Tybee Island. We were going to go see the Tybee Island Lighthouse. And I remember being so excited. I was a little nervous, but I was so excited to go see into the lighthouse. And then we got to the lighthouse, and that's when my troubles started. You see, as a kid, I was afraid of heights. Not so anymore. I love roller coasters, But back then as a kid, I was terrified of heights. I didn't want to go hike up any mountains when we were camping in North Georgia. Didn't want to go up the lighthouse. Anything that had to do with the height that was higher than, I guess, this stage, I was like, I'm good. Y'all have fun. And I made it very clear to my mom, I was not going up in that lighthouse. Now, my mom did her best. She tried to calm me down. She said, "Hey, Jeb, don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. I wouldn't make you do anything dangerous. Everything's going to be okay." But like the disciples in that moment, I was too blinded by my fear to listen to my mom's words. At that moment, I did not have faith in my mom. And how many times have we done that with God? That we're so blinded by our fear that we don't trust God at his word, that things are going to be okay. How many times do we look at God and say, yeah, I know you're God, you've got control of everything, but have you seen what I'm dealing with right here? That's way worse than your promises of things are going to be okay. I've done it. And if y'all think back in your lives, I can probably think y'all have done it too. But when we have moments of doubts, if we allow Jesus to work in our lives, we will have moments that help us grow our faith. And that's what Jesus does. What happens next in this chapter in the book of Luke is something that I think is really, really interesting. Jesus shows the disciples that they needed a lesson on faith. So what does Jesus do? He shows them 3 individuals who had more faith than them at that time. And it's something that's really interesting that we're going to look at. His disciples, he was showing his disciples at 3 different encounters, 3 different people who responded to faith in 3 different ways. And the disciples are going to see what real faith looks like. So, after surviving a deadly storm, Jesus and his disciples encountered a man who was demon-possessed. And honestly, I feel kind of bad for the disciples. Jesus just asked them a question, where is your faith? And the first thing they see is a demon possessing a man who refers to Jesus by his rightful title, Son of the Most High God. The first thing they saw after doubting was that demons had more faith than them at that moment. But that doesn't mean the demons were saved. Because James talks about, we're going to look at James later, James talks about actions are what required for faith. The demons believe, but their actions show that they don't really believe in God. We'll talk about that later in the message. Because what we are about to see also is three individuals whose actions show that they had more faith than the disciples and the demons. So when Jesus casted out the demons, we see in verse 38, the man from whom the demons had gone out begged him to return or to go with Jesus. But Jesus tells him, return home and tell how much God has done for you. So the man went away and told all the town how much Jesus had done for him. This man had encountered Jesus, his first encounter with Jesus, and he felt freedom. He felt he was freed from his oppression of the demons, and he wanted to go with Jesus. But Jesus had an important task for him to do first. He was told to go back home and tell what God had done for him. And obediently, the man returned home. Though he really wanted to join Jesus and the disciples, he had faith in Jesus and was like, I will go home and say what you've done for me, Jesus, because you've changed my life. There are seasons in our lives where we share what God's done for us. When I gave my life to Christ when I was I think I was 7 or 8 years old, it was after VBS one night. The pastor shared his testimony, and he asked, does anyone want to give their life? And I felt a little voice inside me saying, Jeb, this is what I want for you. So he led me through a prayer. He helped me say the prayer to give my life to Jesus. And I remember being so excited. I remember running around the church, telling all my friends, all of their families, all of my family, that I'm a Christian. I gave my life to Jesus. I also remember when I got the call to ministry at youth camp. It was my final year as a youth, and I felt God's call in my life. When that parent chaperone gave me my trinket of a little cross necklace and the card that said, train up the youth in the way they should go, and they shall not depart from it when they're old. I remember afterward calling all of my family. I got the call to ministry. When we see God work in our lives, when we experience God, we cannot help but share what God's doing in our lives. And don't just take my experiences for it. Look at the Bible. The shepherds, after they experienced Jesus being born on that first Christmas morning, what did they do? They went back to their fields, and as they were going back, they told people of Bethlehem what they had done. Peter, when he received the Holy Spirit, he shared the gospel to the people at the Feast of Pentecost. And I think we are told that 3,000 people followed Jesus that day because Peter was sharing what God had done for them. An Old Testament example, Joseph, when he would have a dream, he would tell his family because he experienced God and wanted to share that with his family. We cannot help but experience God and sharing with others what God is doing in our lives. When we experience God, just as we see here with the former demon-possessed man, we can't help but share what God has done. When we first become Christians, it's pretty easy to share what God's done because it's fresh, it's new, we're excited. But we need to be sure to never lose that momentum. So what happens when we lose that momentum? Well, I think it's a pretty easy fix. Think about what God's doing for you that day, that week, that month, and just tell people about it. Hey, here's how God's working with me. Here's how I'm reading the Bible and what God's telling me. Here's what's going on at our church. Because if you don't know where to begin, just start from your day-to-day life. How has God blessed me this day? And how can I share that with others? How has God blessed me this week? How has God blessed me this month? So that was the first example. The former demon-possessed man had enough faith to trust Jesus at his word and go share his experience with others. We got two more to look at. After Jesus and his disciples returned from the region with the demon-possessed man, Jesus is immediately thrown into a crowd. I told y'all he needed that nap. A man named Jairus, he was a leader of the synagogue. He came to Jesus with a plea. We see that in we'll start at verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12 years old, was dying. Jairus came with a plea that, hey, my daughter is sick, she is dying, and I need you, Jesus, to come help. And Jesus, doing what Jesus does best, is like, all right, Jairus, take me to your house, and we're going to go heal your daughter. We see also in verse 42, as Jesus went on his way, the crowd almost crushed him. It was so many people trying to get to Jesus, to experience Jesus. He was being almost crushed by the crowd. But then we meet our second person who has extraordinary faith. A woman who was there had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. This woman had been sick for 12 years. And no one could help her. No matter what they did, no matter how hard the doctors tried, she could not be healed. All hope was lost. She had tried everything. She gave all of her money for doctors to help her, but nothing the doctors could do could help her. But she has an idea when she hears Jesus is in town. She has an idea. We see in Matthew 9:20, if only I could touch his cloak, then I will be healed. You see, she heard Jesus' amazing stories of healing, his amazing miracles, him casting out demons. She's heard all of this. And so she was like, I don't need Jesus to make a big show of it. I don't need everyone to see me be healed. All I need to do is just touch his cloak. I think some translations even say the hem, the seam of his cloak, and I will be healed. Because this sickness she had, being forced for bleeding for 12 years, made her life miserable. She was exiled by the community because the Mosaic law said when a woman had her menstrual cycle, she was considered unclean until the cycle was over. So she had to be outside the community. She was rejected by the community because for 12 years she was experiencing this. She couldn't go see her friends, her family. She had to live outside the city wall because she was considered unclean. Forced to live in isolation. But she knew that Jesus could heal her. She knew that Jesus didn't need to make a big show. All she needed to do was just touch his cloak. She had faith that she would be healed. So the woman broke through the crowd, breaking the Mosaic covenant, being near people while she was considered unclean, going against the social norms, all so she could be near Jesus, close enough to touch the seam of his cloak. And when she touched Jesus' cloak, she was immediately healed. And when she touched Jesus' cloak, Jesus said, "Who touched me?" At first, this is a silly question. I mean, Jesus, there's a lot of people around. You're almost crushed. What do you mean, who touched you? Even Peter makes that same resort. Even Peter says the same thing. Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. What do you mean? But it wasn't the fact that someone physically touched him, that he was crowded around. Jesus tells Peter that he felt his power leave him. And when he sees the woman sick, healed, he tells her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." Sometimes when we need Jesus, all we need to do is have a little faith. Jesus tells his disciples that all you need is faith the size of a mustard seed, and they could move a mountain. If you didn't know this, fun fact, mustard seeds are usually about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. That's tiny. And Jesus told his disciples if they had that amount of faith, they could tell a mountain, go from here to there. What we see is that this woman who had been sick for 12 years displayed that faith. All she needed was to touch Jesus' cloak, and she knew she would be healed because her faith is what made her well. It wasn't Jesus' power, it was her faith in Jesus is what made her well. But we got to look at our third person. We were already introduced to him, but I think this is where we see Jairus' faith. Because after this moment, Jairus receives horrible news. That conversation with the woman took too long. Jairus' daughter is dead. This was devastating news for any parent to hear. He went out of his way to find Jesus. He went out of his way to ask Jesus, I need you right now. Please come help my daughter. But it was too late. Jairus received the worst news, and the people around him who told him the news was like, hey, Jairus, it's too late. Just leave the teacher alone. Let him go about his day. But Jesus had a different response. Jesus says in verse 50, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be well. And Jairus took Jesus' words to heart because he believed that Jesus could heal his daughter and bring his daughter back. Jairus could have just said, it's too late. They're right. I'm not going to mess with Jesus anymore. I mean, if he didn't take so long talking to this woman, maybe we could have healed my daughter in time. But instead, he was like, you're right, Jesus. I do believe in you. I'm going to follow you and trust you that you will bring my daughter back. So we see Jesus he sends the mourners away and tells them, hey, y'all go away. She's not dead. She's just asleep. Just go. And he brings with him Peter, James, and John, his inner circle. Now, maybe these were the 3 disciples who needed the most reminder of what faith looked like, or maybe it was just because they were in Jesus' inner circle. But Peter, James, John, and her parents were with Jesus when they saw her bring back Jairus' daughter. But he took her by the hand and said, my child, get up. Her spirit returned at once. She stood up. Then Jesus told her parents Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, and he ordered them not to tell anyone about what had happened. If Jairus didn't have faith that Jesus would heal his daughter, the story would have turned out very, very differently. But he had faith. One interesting thing of note: how long was the woman sick for? I'm sorry? 12 years. Okay. How old was Jairus' daughter? 12. So you're telling me, based on Luke's account and the other Gospels, the woman got sick around the same time this girl was born. Which means when they both encountered Jesus, it was supposed to happen that way. So God can show through Jesus who he was, that he had power over death to bring Jairus' daughter back and to heal this woman that could not be healed. That is an interesting fact if you think about it, that it was supposed to happen that way. Jesus knew this woman was going to come, touch him, leave his power, and he would have a small conversation with her. Also, the sickness could take Jairus' daughter's life, so he could bring her back so they could show who he is, so that God could be glorified. That was supposed to happen. 2 families who probably had nothing to do with each other had a single moment and a single encounter with Jesus that happened on the same day. And maybe that's happening to you. Maybe life's not going your way. Maybe you're asking Jesus, I need you, please help. But because something isn't right, something isn't aligned with God's plan yet, like the woman, sickness, and Jairus' daughter, God has a plan for everything. This was part of that plan, was that these two stories would coincide so that God could show who he is as the Son of, so Jesus could show who he is as the Son of God, healing the woman whose sickness was unhealable and bringing back Jairus' daughter. This all was supposed to happen according to God's plan. We have one more passage I want to look at, and I told you we'd come back to this. Turn to your Bibles to Luke chapter 2. This has been a very heated debate in the theological community. So start with me in verse 14 of James chapter 2. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith? We're in verse 14. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. James 2:14. What good is it, my brother and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and be well fed," but does nothing about it, their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by actions, is dead. But some will say, "You have faith and I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds." You believe there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. You foolish person, do you not want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered Isaac on the altar? You see, his faith and his actions were working together, and his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scriptures was fulfilled to say that Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. And the same way was not even Rahab, the prostitute, considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so is faith without deeds. So, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to earn our way to heaven by doing actions and works? No. What Paul is saying here is that your faith should produce works, should produce deeds. Actions speak louder than words. We've heard that said all the time. That passage reminds me of a story in high school. One of my friends walked up to me and she was like, "Jeb, you're different." In high school, you don't want to hear that. And I was like, what do you mean? To which she said, "You don't act like you live in the world." To which I responded to her, "Well, yeah, the Bible tells me to live in the world, but not be of the world." This friend recognized I was different because of the actions I did to live out my faith. She was able to recognize that I was different. And I don't know what she's doing right now. She wasn't a Christian in high school. But I hope and I pray that if she ever has questions about faith in Jesus and the Bible, she'll remember, oh, this is what Jeb was doing back in high school. This is why that was so important to him. As I close now, I ask the same question Jesus asked you, or asked his disciples. Where is your faith? Are you like the disciples and you're letting fear blind your faith and your life circumstances are getting in the way and trusting in Jesus? Are you like the former demon-possessed man who, as soon as you experienced God, you faithfully obeyed him and went and told what God had done for you? Are you like the woman who was sick for 12 years and you just had a little bit of faith because that was all you had left. And God showed up for you because of that little faith? Or are you like Jairus, who, unlike the disciples, he didn't let fear control him? He had faith in what Jesus was going to do for him and his family, to do the impossible. What's great about your faith journey is you're probably going to experience all of these at some point in your life. As I've shared this morning, I have been like the disciples and let the circumstances of my life blind my faith in Jesus. But I've also had the tiniest amount of faith like the woman, and Jesus moved. And there were times where I didn't let my fear blind me as the disciples did. No matter where you are in life, keep your eyes on Jesus, and he will keep producing miracles in your life as you need them. Join me in prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for this day, and thank you for your many blessings, and thank you for gathering us here together to worship you and fellowship with other believers. I thank you, Lord, that our faith journey isn't stagnant, and I pray, Lord, that if anyone here is blinded by their fear and life circumstances, that you will show up for them, that you will show them what faith looks like. And I pray, Lord, this message helped people stuck there see what their faith is like. And I pray, Lord, whatever storms are coming, that we keep our eyes on you through it, and you help them grow closer to you. In your holy and precious name that I pray. Amen.